Hello, dear friends from around the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. We hope that you're healthy and safe wherever that may be. And then certainly for us coming out of our headquarters here in Los Angeles and Beverly Hills, our hearts go out to all those that have suffered and are surviving and will soon again be thriving from the historic fires here. But we know that many others around the world are being challenged by others risks and issues. So we send our love and support to everyone, but we also embrace the potential of a new Western New Year 2025. And we are in our last day of Davos Worldwide, which is committed to advancing sustainable peace and prosperity around the world, inclusive and engaged. And we have had an incredible week. We want to thank the leaders of Davos Worldwide, Anand and Annika, the incredible team, especially our young tech team that has done such a remarkable job. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Sanjeev Khagram. I have the great honor and privilege of being the Foundation Professor of Global Leadership and Global Futures at the Thunderbird School of Global Management at Arizona State University, where I'm on leave. I'm on leave now, currently as a visiting scholar at Stanford University, my alma mater, but also involved in lots of wonderful other initiatives, including I've just launched a brand new incredible bank in Los Altos in Silicon Valley, in the heart of Silicon Valley, called Altos Bank, and feel very blessed to be part of this great Davos Worldwide community. As part of that bank, I got introduced to an incredible, transformative individual, and that is Deborah Perry Piscione, who we have the great honor and privilege of having with us today. And it is a great honor and privilege because we've had tremendous sessions throughout the week, but this really is, get ready, strap on. It's going to be amazing because she's going to take us not only to the into the future, but into the dynamic future that awaits us all and the optimism and possibilities and potential of all these futures. Deborah really has an incredible career. And towards the end of our time, because we have so many young people, Deborah, from around the world, I want you to share a little bit about insights and lessons and wisdom from your incredible multifaceted career. But right now, let me give you a little bit of background on our incredible speaker. Deborah is a renowned futurist and expert in business strategy and growth, as well as government, civics, civil society, all sectors, specializing in the transformation of work and organizations in the era of artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence, as we like to say, and Web3 technologies. As the co-founder and chief executive officer of Work3 Institute, she leads cutting-edge research and advisory services on the convergence of AI, blockchain, and emerging technologies, strategic insights on their profound impact on business models, organizational structures, and the future of work and our lives more generally. She's a seasoned Silicon Valley entrepreneur, investor, board director, and New York Times bestselling author. She has established herself as the preeminent thought leader in AI ethics, innovation, and strategic risk-taking. Her expertise and has made her a sought-after advisor to Fortune 500 institutions and really leading institutions across sectors all over the world. She's also the architect of improvisational innovation. And we certainly want to ask more about that in the conversation because it's such a powerful and compelling frame. A groundbreaking bottom-up innovation process that creates a safe environment for employees to propose new ideas, particularly those leveraging AI and Web3 technologies. She's had an incredible career across the entertainment industry and communications, across government, across the private sector. And now this 2025, January, this week, and particularly January 28th, her next greatest contribution among many is coming out. Her forthcoming book, Employment is Dead, exclamation point, How Disruptive Technologies Are Revolutionizing the Way We Work. Harvard Business Review Press next week. It's already out available on Amazon and all sorts of other platforms. And we get a sneak preview into this incredible new contribution to our lives, our work, the way we engage with one another, our organizations, and as I said, the potential futures that we can all co-create together to advance sustainable peace and prosperity. So with that, Deborah, welcome. We're grateful. We're honored.
Thank you.
Please, we're going to pass it over to you to share a few opening remarks, comments, provocations, and then we'll have a nice fireside chat, virtual fireside chat with you. So welcome, my dear.
Thank you so much. We may want to talk a bit first. I'm not able to share quite my screen, and I think it'll be less impactful
Okay, so let
without
me
the
ask you the
screen.
question I was going to ask earlier, because, you've been a best-selling author, you've been in government, you've been in media, you've been, business strategy. And part of the focus of Davos Worldwide is, of course, engaging with all of us older folks around the world that are advanced in our professional lives. But even more important to us is to engage with our younger generation, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, Gen Next, and beyond. And I know you've been doing that throughout your career and certainly now. So share a little bit. I gave the overview of your incredible career, but some of your journey to get to this point,
Sure, absolutely.
and particularly for our young people, so they can be inspired and learn from you.
Yeah, I spent 18 years in Washington, D.C. I don't know if we can
Lost you, but I've
trying again here. How's that? Okay, perfect. So so much of what I do, Sanjeev, is really rooted in just the way I see the world. I do come from this place of fairness, equity, democratization is at the forefront. And so I spent initially 18 years in Washington, D.C. I worked on Capitol Hill. I was appointed in the White House with the first President Bush. I'm dating myself here. And then I completely fell into media. The RNC had called one day and said, the Republican National Committee said, can you kind of go out there for us and be a surrogate? And I thought I would speak on foreign policy and economics, which were my expertise at the time. And they're like, no, 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 we want you to go out there and speak on the Clinton and Monica Lewinsky scandal. And that sort of got the world's attention at that point. And when we ended up moving to Silicon Valley, it wasn't until I looked back on those 18 years that I learned how to do two things really well. I learned in Washington, D.C., how to divide people into an us versus them, because it was very much you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, you're for me, you're against me, you support this, you're against it. And I also learned how to put fear in people. Because if you're CNN and you want more viewers, you just put fear in people. If you're running for political office, the goal is to put fear in people because that helps increase contributions. And those were the two things that I learned how to do really well. So coming to Silicon Valley, where I spent 18 years in Washington, now 18 years in Silicon Valley, I had to learn an entirely new mindset around collaboration. And rather than the question being, where did you go to school or who do you work for? People were starting to ask me in Silicon Valley, how can I help you? And that one question can make such a difference between success and failure. It's really allowing a conversation to flow in a very different way than where did you go to school? What floor do you work on? Because that determines your level of power in Washington. And so I ended up sitting at a Starbucks 3 weeks after being in Silicon Valley, and a conversation happened, and the woman at the end said, how can I help you? 3 weeks later, I was sitting down with a partner at Kleiner Perkins, which was the premier venture capital firm at the time. And he said to me, I like you. I'm going to fund you. Figure out something to do. And 18 months later, that company sold. It was incredible to me. And I thought to myself, had I been in a situation where I was still on the East Coast, this would have never happened. So what was it about Silicon Valley? What was it about this mindset and this cultural uniqueness that made it the innovation capital of the world? And so I set out the next 18 months trying to figure out that question. A lot had been written about Silicon Valley from more a quantifiable standpoint, maybe in comparison to what was going on in Boston or the Chapel Hill area research triangle park. But I wanted to know culturally, why competitors work together, why people put people first. And this was not a place to come to if you were concerned about power or greed. It really was a lot of individuals who knew very early on what they wanted to do, who were comfortable taking risks, who were collaborating with their competitors to say, let's work together to push this boulder up the hill so that we have a better outcome for both of us. And so I wrote the book, Secrets of Silicon Valley. It got picked up in 39 countries around the world. And so I started traveling and working with one of the tier one consulting firms and trying to figure out this question of not just Silicon Valley, the culture, but what is it about risk taking? What is it about being able to harness good ideas from any person in any corner of the company? And really, how do we work in a way that's more human? And so that really started my journey between building out a company, writing a book, and speaking. And it was sort of a wash and repeat for me. And now I'm on the book, Employment is Dead, How Disruptive Technologies Are Revolutionizing the Way We Work. Because again, this is really about democratization and people being able to put their value based on a meritocracy and not on a piece of paper where they went to school and who they know. So it's a really exciting time to be doing this work.
Wow, thank you so much. This is incredible. And I know you now have capabilities, but let me ask you one or two more questions and then we can get to the book, which is the main focus, of course, the new book. Because Secrets of Silicon Valley, I just want to share with our audience, if you haven't read it, is a fantastic treatise, and you should do it. It's a very easy read. It's fun. It's exciting. And particularly for those of us around the world trying to, obviously Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley, right? And this is one of my questions to you. But people are trying to create these entrepreneurial innovation ecosystems all around the world. So the two questions before we get to the book are, one, share some more insights into how they could do that. Obviously, Silicon Valley, but everybody has to create their own. But some of the lessons, ideas, insights. But the other question is, I go around the world like you do so much, and a lot of people start saying, well, Silicon Valley is not so exciting so much. So what keeps, what's your view on that? Is Silicon Valley, what's happening in Silicon Valley and this obviously then connects right to the book that you're putting out this next week. So
yeah, for sure. I always say you have to start from a place of trust. Washington, D.C., you started from a place of distrust until you had a reason to trust people. And I think you have to flip that on its head. I've taught innovation around the world, and I often am in the room with two CEOs and they say, we don't even trust each other. So how are we supposed to work together? And the flip side is, do you want to continue to lose market share, or do you want to take that risk in terms of being able to move forward and creating something much more meaningful and greater collectively? And the second thing on that part of which is so damning in so many places around the world is this idea of failure. I can't tell you how many times I've failed, but I've never not learned a tremendous lesson in the process. And I think what makes Silicon Valley distinct is it's like a badge of honor to have failure. I think the perspective is we look at the Elon Musk and all the other successful big time entrepreneurs out there, and we suggest or we think based on what we're fed to us through the media that they've never had a failure in their life, or they haven't gone through a stressful period. And the end of the day, this is meant to be hard because hard things bring great joy, whether they work out or not. But in the process, it's recognizing that this is all part of the journey. And it's almost like you have to relinquish yourself to whatever that journey is that you need to be on right now. I can't even tell you how difficult it took me 4 months to land a job on Capitol Hill. And I was 20 years old because I had finished undergraduate early. And I went from door to door, knocking on doors, and literally people slammed doors on my face. Then when I did land a second job and I started doing speaking engagements for the congresswoman I was working for, she kind of threw me out there in a very precarious way because she was the first Cuban American in Congress. I was there to speak on her initiatives around Israel because she was on the Foreign Affairs Committee. And at that point, people literally threw chairs at me. So you have to take a few bruises, scrapes along the way. But if you believe in what you're doing and you're authentically you, you have to turn out the noise as best you can, but recognize there'll be some bumps along the way.
Well, thank you so much. I will say, just put a plug in to my wonderful colleagues at Stanford at the Stanford Technology Venture Program. They've launched a new initiative called the Stanford Entrepreneurial Resilience Initiative, Stanford Initiative on Entrepreneurial Resilience, very much along these lines, Deborah, and colleagues and friends around the world, really that, entrepreneurs have to be incredibly resilient and their mental health, their well-being, all the hard knocks they have to go through in order to reach those successes. That's a big ask. And so we want to be, thoughtful about that. So let's now go over to the new book, which is, I know, the next great mountain that you've climbed, and you're taking us and looking out into the horizon. So work is dead, or employment is dead. Work is not dead. Work is very much alive, but employment is dead. Please do share a little bit about this.
Yeah, let's keep talking a bit as I try to figure out where this is.
Okay, no worries. We're
But
there.
I think you raised such an interesting point in that it's not just what I talk about a lot now with this new work is the fact that everybody has to think about themselves as an entrepreneur because employment is dead. And so, we're just at this place that, let's see if I can get this. No, that didn't work. Give me a moment, please. Keep talking.
Or is why don't you get that? And I will say that, that's why this book is going to be so important for all of us, because really doesn't mean that we won't have jobs, as you'll hear. It doesn't mean that we won't have work, but the nature of it all will be transforming in a very profound way. And as we're doing this, Deb, and if you can multitask, which I know you can, for those, AI is everywhere. So before we get into AI and employment, give us a little bit about your perspective on where we are with AI. It's happening so fast, it's rapid, you're right at the center of it. More generally, what are your perspectives currently about AI, and what do we expect to happen over the next, year or so? If I haven't lost you. Oh, I think we lost Deborah. We'll try to get her right back. Bear with us, everyone. If you're waiting, I'm sure she'll be back any second. Well, I'll fill in with my own perspectives on AI. So obviously it's an exponential transformation. On the one hand, however, we are getting into this world in which there's this kind of binary sort of view of AI. The one is the AI, evangelists. AI is everything, everywhere, omnipresent, and will be the driving force of everything. And that obviously is not true. At the same time, those who say, AI is overstated, overblown, really more of a problem than an opportunity. And that's in fact not the truth. The truth, not surprising, lies somewhere in between those ends of the continuum. And in my own view, and I want to ask Deborah as she's back, there are incredible opportunities, and AI is moving so rapidly. We're moving into agentic AI. So many other things are possible. At the same time, we have to keep on paying attention to the risks, whether that is energy usage or privacy and all sorts of other things. So, Deborah, I was asking you before you jumped off, maybe share, before you go into the book, your perspective on where we are with AI, because it's so hyped up. It's so, contentious. And
Yeah.
you kind of have AI evangelists and AI, opponents or adversaries, and they kind of are clouding, what I think to be reasonable, I think, cautious optimism about what we can and how we can harness AI for all of us. So,
Well, there's a tremendous amount of fear, and that fear is really rooted in the unknown. right? And so, I'm looking at it from a more comprehensive perspective. You've got enterprise on the one hand, it's incredibly expensive at this time for them to adopt. Things are moving at such a rapid clip. Their data has to be really in a good place to be able to optimize AI for its purposes. And then the flip side, if you kind of go beyond the tech stack, the flip side is there's just a lot of unknown with regards to the future of the labor market, what it's going to look like for the individual. I was starting to say that we all need to think about, ourselves as entrepreneurs, because that 30-year career at the same company is long gone. And we're going to have to adopt this mindset that we're going to have portfolio careers where maybe we engage in the one thing we were trained in, whether it's through a skills certification or a college degree. We may only spend 20% of the time doing that thing. And 80% of the time, we're going to have to figure out other things we like to do that can be revenue generators in our lives. I'm not sure. Can you still hear me?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. I'm not able to get the slides up on my side, but maybe they can do it internally since they have them. So we'll just continue talking. The challenge, Sanjeev, is that we name this book Employment is Dead. And we know that the title can be quite distressing. So we get this question of, what does that all mean? And so it's really, I approach this like, what if I told you everything you know about work is about to become obsolete?
Yeah.
The 40-hour work week, the office, these are going to be relics of the past. And your human coworker, they're about to be outnumbered by AIs. And this is where the real fear is. We know that AI at this time, one person can take over the job of another person. And soon it's going to be a second person, and third it's going to be a third
Yes.
person. And really, truly, by the time I finish the sentence, an AI somewhere will have completely completed a task that used to take a human an entire day. So you start to question, what is our value, in this process about work with generative AI coming into the workforce? But then even below that current, and this is what we like to talk about, we know that AI is hot in the media, but we also have to recognize that below the current of all this AI noise, decentralized work is going to follow, where technologies such as blockchain, the metaverse, digital twins, DAOs, smart contracts, they're going to bring in a whole new style of work. And so admittedly, the things that I talk about or can be years in the future, it does give us the opportunity to really redefine work as we know it. So in our book, we've referred to this transformation as the Work 3 revolution. So, I want to take you a little bit on this journey, not just around AI, but the Web3 technologies that will enable this future of decentralized work. So I often get asked the question, what is decentralized work? So simply put, it's the end of the company as we know it, and it's the birth of work without walls. So think about Uber. They really started to introduce this concept of decentralized work, but now through blockchain technologies, it's set to revolutionize the entire concept of employment. So like in this emerging paradigm, work is going to be defined by output and not location or hours logged. And I have to say, I was that person sitting in Washington, D.C. in my early 20s. I never understood if I was more efficient, or maybe I skipped lunch that day and I got my work done by 2:00, why did I have to sit there until 6:00? And we have to remember that this current notion of work as we know us, this is based on Taylorism. Taylorism comes from a 1911 concept, was developed by an engineer to say, people don't have feelings, they don't have emotions, they're just cogs on a wheel. And it worked great during assembly lines, but somehow we adopted this command and control style where I've got to be able to see you to prove that you're actually doing something. And for people, their talents will flow across global networks. We'll be assembling into fluid teams based on expertise and passions and project needs rather than hierarchies in the org chart. Because I got to tell you, the org chart does have the propensity to being taken over by AI. So I get questions in the media all the time, like, can we see a workforce where there's no more managers? The key is, or the answer is absolutely. Can there be a CEO replaced by AI? The answer is absolutely. Because it really is a function of smart decision making based on data, based on being able to make projections. This is where it starts to really be the complete reimagining of how people are going to collaborate, how value is created, and how careers will unfold in a hyper-connected, AI-enhanced global economy. Now, I'm happy to, I can keep going, but I'm happy to, if you have some questions, feel free to jump in.
Yes, let me jump in. First of all, I do want to mention, you mentioned a term, DAO, just for those of you around the world, decentralized autonomous organizations, maybe the most extreme, as far as we know, at least theoretically, if not in practice, version of decentralized work and engagement that Deb is talking about. So, if you want to share a little bit more about that particular thing. But you started off, I think what would help folks, certainly myself, always, I'm an examples person, some more examples. So you started with Uber, and I think, Uber is very interesting and we use it a lot, but I think it's really about the fact that those drivers are entrepreneurs, as you're saying, right?
Yeah.
So they not only have a contract with Uber, but with Lyft and a bunch of others, and they're not beholden just to Uber itself, right? So they then are in the driver's seat, right? That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the portfolio career. You may be a software engineer, and unfortunately, when you got that college degree 10 years ago, you're completely in demand. Now AI is one of those things that's taking over coding, but you may spend less and less time doing that one thing you're deeply experienced in. And maybe you enjoy driving, maybe you enjoy dog walking. I mean, a lot of these platforms that came through Web 2.0, like Rover for dog walking, you can cobble money and revenue in very, very unique ways. And then, we cannot underestimate the platform of Upwork or even Roblox for that matter. I mean, we have so many interesting examples of teenage game developers who have made hundreds of thousands of dollars developing games. And
Yeah.
so, this is an entirely new economy on top of digital assets that Gen Z has really, really taken to. So, it's this incredible way to really start to put the power back into the individual. Right now, we're seeing forced return to work. It's a lot of excuses. Maybe some of these companies are dealing with long-term leases that they can't get out of. But we are now at a place where we actually have a generation coming into the workforce who knows more about the future of work than the corporate executives leading these companies. And that's a very dangerous scenario because that's an inverted situation to really disrupt everything as we know it.
So with that, let me then ask you to walk us through, in some sense, the demographic, where we are in our life, spans. So I'm a CEO or a senior manager in a company, been out there for 30 years. This AI thing is happening. What do I do then? How do I adapt to this new reality?
Yeah, the reality is this has got to be a partnership. And if I had my slides, I would be showing it really does require an entirely new mindset, both for the company and the individual. This is now a collaboration. This is a partnership. This is not command and control. This is about allowing people to have flexibility to work on their rhythm when they work both best. That was one of the biggest lessons I needed to learn coming to Silicon Valley because I was so schooled in this 8 to 6 mindset, right? And I thought everybody operates the way they do in paranoia, Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. So my first co-founder was an engineer, or he is an engineer, and he literally worked throughout the night. I could never reach him during the day unless we had meetings, unless we had to fly off somewhere. I would get so frustrated. But at the end of the day, he did incredible work that was done by the next morning by the time I woke up. So what is the fear of allowing people to work best when they work best? What's the fear of allowing someone to experience their kid's soccer game or their spouse's doctor appointment during the day? It doesn't mean that we're not less committed. So it really is more about recognizing this new playbook that's required and looking at it in terms of human value in the workforce, because that's really the true revolution that is about to happen.
So going back to the CEO, based on what you just said, or the senior leadership of companies, some might cynically say, well, look, they're not really AI powered, but they can, pay if they need to go get classes at, Stanford and MIT and all sorts of other places around the world to kind of catch up. They're not going to be the ones doing the stuff, doing the plumbing, but they can harness it. They can hire folks and so forth. And so, they can kind of do what they're, but the middle level in particular are the ones that are going to lose. Just talk to some folks from a major consulting firm. You could pick any one of them. It's the same thing. Basically, freezing all hiring and predictions, not only predictions, but basically communications that they're going to be reducing. At the same time,
Yes.
they put out a challenge, internal challenge to all their team, staff, employees that says, we'll give you X dollars for coming up with an AI innovation for our consulting firm that will basically put you out of work. Right? So how does someone in their mid-career now, I'm working down the pyramid, right? You're at the top. You can, sort of manage it because you have all these resources and capabilities. Now you're in the middle, mid-career. You're thinking about, you were part of this old world that you're talking about, right? Hierarchy. I'm working my way up and so forth. Now it's all changed. What do you do as a mid-career professional with
That is the biggest question, right? When the realization sets in and we understand how AI is going to initially augment our brain power, right? But then companies soon are going to recognize, and by the way, we may be talking to that same consulting firm. We'll have to offline.
I'm sure we are.
Now AI is going to work 24/7, where these co-pilots and agents, they don't take vacations. They get along with their coworkers. They don't celebrate holidays. They never complain. They don't call in sick. They don't need health insurance. They don't need to get paid, except for that initial investment in that tech stack. So we can actually picture a workforce where everyone is empowered by AI to perform at a genius level. So again, the onus is really on each of us. It's not just mid-level management. I mean, you want to talk about revolutionizing education and higher education and how you prepare for that workforce, even K through 12. Let's stop making young people feel like they're in this box, that they can't color outside the lines, that they are individuals who can think for themselves and really have to get incredibly scrappy. And I think the bigger question, Sanjeev, as well, is we all talk about this increased productivity, right? That's going to happen. The bigger question is how much can we absorb? And so you look at, we have a number of things going on simultaneously, and I'll just comment because we all saw the news yesterday. With Trump now President Trump making this enormous investment in AI. So we have the global competition to beat out China, right? In AI development and machine learning. We want to make sure that Silicon Valley remains having its edge, but we also need to recognize that people outside of Silicon Valley, I feel like a lot of Europe gets it, a lot of Asia gets it. We definitely need a lot of decisions to settle on things beyond AI, like cryptocurrency. I mean, we need to move a lot quicker in Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
just as we do as individuals recognizing how fast this is all hitting us. And I will say, if we're talking to that same consulting firm, there's a lot of fear whether their whole business is going to go away.
That's right. Why not AI consultants around the world? I know
Yes,
you're talking about all these other job positions and so forth, but board members, right? We can have AI board members,
100%.
right?
Yes,
And we're already
yes.
starting to see that.
Yeah, and I also think, I mean, I think it's so interesting to have real board members and have the CEO be AI, because the decision-making process, getting along with the board, a lot of things that uh, definitely comp, when you talk about comp, the discrepancy between the CEO and a worker, that gets eliminated as well.
Yeah.
Um, and then, we've got Gen Z, they really don't distinguish between real economies and virtual economies. And now, you look at a company like Roblox, and last quarter, young people spent almost 900 million on virtual goods. So we've come to this place where we're not just facing a new economy, we're witnessing the birth of an entirely new civilization. And so for that younger generation, I tell a lot of parents all the time, skills are going to win, and they're going to win over college degrees. And we've been blowing that horn for a little while. Peter Thiel, I think, sort of started it. Google started picking up talented high schoolers. We don't want to wait those 4 years for young, smart individual people to continue to learn in this environment where they're told what to do rather than allow them to think for themselves. And then we're going from a work-life balance to an era of work-life fusion. Well, there'll be this seamless integration, particularly for younger people, between passion, play, and profit.
So I was going to ask this later, but since you brought it up, the work-life fusion frame, you know, the fear there, though, as we're talking about fears, is it's always work, right? We're never off, right? So the old world of 9 to 6 had all of its problems that you shared both personally and more generally, but the new world has this sense that it's 24/7 all the time because AI can do that 24/7 all the time, right? And so we're entrepreneurs. We have to be always resilient and adaptive and so forth. And so if we go to sleep, we're going to miss out. So we shouldn't sleep. And that's not a good idea. So how in this work-life fusion world do we actually stay balanced and healthy?
Well, that's the thing. We've had such a negative connotation on the word work for
Yeah.
so long. And I think one thing that Silicon Valley embodies so well is work is that passion, right? And so if we're able to be more authentic to truly who we are, block out that noise of what parents and teachers and the world is telling us to be. And then I'll share, I want to get a bit into this innovation process that I developed, because so much for so many generations, we ended up doing a lot what our parents did because we didn't have the exposure much beyond that. So you get to college, you have no idea what your dad, what you want to do. And if your dad's an accountant, you end up becoming an accountant. Now, this is prior generations. But when I started studying, how do you bring in a bottoms up innovation process into the workplace where you can harness great ideas in any corner of the company, I came to this realization that so many people had been pushed down from what they really wanted to do. There was this societal expectation, this academic expectation, and little by little, we take the risk-taking ability out of individuals. And so when I went to build this process where anybody can come forth with a good idea based on where the company's maybe pain points were, opportunity spaces, under addressed needs, it really gave those accountants of the world the opportunity to play in other areas that they have passion for, that maybe they're hobbyists for on the weekend. So one individual in particular, he tinkered with robotics in the early days of robotics. He was an accountant because his dad was an accountant. And this guy ended up being able, because this process that we put in place to be able to put forth good ideas, he was able to build in a $230 million revenue plan for year one. Just at the time, it was teaching the robot how to make turns based on artificial light. And it was something that was so needed in warehouses and supply chains at that time. So this individual ended up doing really well, despite the fact that he had this career in accounting. And we just have to recognize that work is not a dirty word. And so I was asked, like, what is the future going to look like for us? And I almost feel like we're coming full circle. Not that we're going to come back to Neanderthal days, but we may grow our own food. We may become a lot more European in the process, where we can take that month of August off and really explore, hobbies and interest in cooking and all sorts of things. That this Taylorism mindset, I've got to be controlled, I'm going to be monitored on the keystrokes that I take or the time that I'm sitting in my chairs. I mean, give me a break. We're humans, we're not robots.
Yeah.
And so, I really feel like we are moving into this place that can be quite utopic, while somebody has an eye on how far AI takes us.
So let's talk about then, just on that, everyday AI. How does an individual, and how do you, because I get this asked all the time, and I love to hear from you, and I'm sure our folks around the world would, which is, how do we just, the simple ways to use AI to improve our lives and our work? What are some of your, easy ways, get started, or use it in this way?
Well, I'm going to give you my cheat sheet, and I'm sure you probably have experienced the same thing. I very much was in tune to my kids, particularly when they're in middle school, my boys in particular, because they did attend a school. They were quite fortunate where, many of those parents were at Google and Apple and, those leading tech companies as engineers. And I remember my boys specifically, they're now almost turning 20, but in middle school, they're like, Mommy, you need to invest in this Bitcoin. And I'm like, I'm not investing in Bitcoin. And this was like when it was $100 a share. I did invest much, 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 much later in Bitcoin. I'm a big crypto enthusiast. Turn to your kids, because they're learning a lot faster than you are. And so if you have to write an email or write a letter or write a proposal or build a deck, there are tremendous tools. I'm a big Claude fan, which is part of Anthropic, for writing. And learn how to, I remember in the early chat GPT days, it did sound rather chat GPT, but the technology gets better every day and it becomes more conversational every day. Just tinker, play with it. Sometimes when I'm looking for something provocative, I will push it and push it. I'll get a response and it'll ask me, do you want me to focus on anything in particular? And I'll say, yes, I do, but I want this more provocative. I want this more thought-provoking. I want people to walk away with something they didn't know today. And so even if you just explore and do searches, I've got to build a deck. Well, Gamma.ai is great for it. It's not perfect, but every day it's getting better and better and better. And so, wherever the wind takes you, just to commit an hour or two on the weekend to learning and upskilling.
That's great. Let me take it, completely the other direction, which is, we're talking about Silicon Valley, we're talking about the United States, you brought up Europe, China, but, a lot of folks from around the world in emerging markets and developing economies, talk about fear and anxiety.
Yeah.
Whether they're government leaders, business leaders, ordinary citizens. Now we're going to be even further behind. it's, exponential, the gap between where we are and, the autonomous vehicles and, and so forth and so on. And we don't even want those autonomous vehicles because our big issue is we got a lot of people. So we don't want to get, replace people. How do you start to engage with folks around the world in emerging markets developing, where they're not the ones driving the AI engine, right? They're not the ones at the frontier and they're really concerned. They're really concerned, right?
So that's an incredibly loaded question, right? I travel a lot through the third world. I actually think individuals, particularly the young people, are better set up to adopt AI and adopt the future than those of us schooled here who are told to color within the lines and raising a generation where we need to be told what to do. So what's interesting is so much of, I'm sure you know, AI ethics or machine learning, a lot of this is being taken to Africa to get people to help it with the machine learning. So I'm a big fan of reverse innovation because I often think the more scrappy, the less you have, the faster you can move ahead. And so, I challenge that notion because I often feel, really trying to think how to say this in a diplomatic way. I don't think we're serving ourselves well outside of Silicon Valley within the United States for being able to quickly understand the benefits. So I actually think in many ways, AI, Gen AI, and these other technologies democratizes opportunity to people who've often been left out of this economic equation. So I work with a group with foster youth, and I tell them, look, if you learned how to prompt Facebook, you can learn how to prompt Gen AI. And so it is that survival mechanism, I think, that many of us are going to be facing in the very, very near future of, how we cobble things together and how we learn as rapidly as we can to have a sustainable lifestyle.
Thank you so much. And you earlier you took us out in the frontier, AIs will do what we do in a day, then many of us in a day, and then hundreds and thousands and so forth.
Yeah.
That's one kind of clear transformational journey we're on. The other one is robots, right? Where it's not our devices that we're using and engaging with around AI, whether that's our tablets or our phones or supercomputers, but actual physical cyber creatures that are AI powered. Talk to me and talk to us about how far are we from that? How do we think about that? How do we prepare for that? How do we harness that effectively?
So let me just state I'm absolutely not an expert here, but I think the real fear, and you mentioned augmented AI, right? When all of this sort of coalesces, you've got robotics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, data-driven decision making. That's where it gets pretty terrifying. I know right now this is something you and I know a little bit about, you much more so than I. We need the power in the semiconductors and the GPUs to uh, even harness and leverage Gen AI within the workplace in the ways that we need it. So that takes time, as you know, to develop. But that's when things will get really to a point where we have to start to monitor. I mean, I don't want to be a fearmonger here, but it is that next generation after the atomic bomb, right? It is that place where we can put robots in to think on their own and make their own decisions.
I mean, it is on the one hand potentially very dystopic, right? Ever to be in
Yes.
that type of a world, right? And people are, and of course we're all watching, one of the books series that we all grew up on, many of us, Dune, is out there talking about the post-apocalyptic, beyond thinking machines world. Let me ask you a different question, which is, what draw, you're such an inspirational person.
Thank
You
you.
inspire all of us. Where do you draw your inspiration given what's happening? Because it can be overwhelming. And and we've talked about fear and anxiety and uncertainty and so forth. How do you, where is the inspiration come from? And how do you try to, marshal that for others as well?
Because I am really rooted in democratization and equality. My brother got supported to go to university. By the time I went to undergrad and grad, there was no more money. I really had to forge my own path. I got into some incredible schools that I wanted to go to in Boston, and my parents were like, not happening. And so I got through undergrad as quick as I could. I just have always been sensitized to fairness and equality. If we're going to run a marathon, we all start from the same place, right? And then you're timed. But we do live in a world of haves and have-nots. And so I always resented kind of that New York, Wall Street, greed is good, how much money does one person need? And so now we're at a place where we don't have to fit into these rigid, one size societal norms or work constructs. We can imagine such a far better balanced life. Um, and I do want to say one thing about the benefits of Gen AI. I mean, I actually believe we can embrace life stage flexibility, where maybe you just finished a certificate or a college degree and you want to be in an office 5 days a week. You're going to be able to have a much shorter workday, which is going to take so much pressure off the planet if we're all not commuting at the same time, right? We've got to fix the planet. But what if you just had a child and you want to work 2 days a week? We can now conceivably think about reimagining. Again, this is not about time. This is just about output. So we just need to get over this obsession of FaceTime and recognize, and really we're at the precipice of two fundamental questions. What type of world do we want to live in? And how do we want to spend our time? And so we can actually imagine cities, with reduced congestion and pollution. Like, let's just do it. And, the shift really it has to cascade in recognizing that, we can create this ripple effect that touches every aspect of our society. And
So
unfortunately, I'll say one last thing. In talking about the fires in LA, which are just tragic, and lots of other problems in this country and globally around the world. So much of this is in our control. And I guess we all have to ask ourselves, what type of world do we want to live in?
I want to take these two last questions as we wrap up. The first one is on how we want to spend our time. Now, we both have kids, young people that are in the creative industries. And one of the, continuing tropes is that, with AI, with Web3, with all of these tools, digital, it actually allows us more time to be creative, to be playful. And in fact, no matter how sophisticated AI gets, that's still going to be uniquely human creativity. Others say, actually, AI very rapidly, becoming more creative than the creators. So what about that whole dimension of, how we want to spend our time? Creativity brings joy, you can play and so forth. And yet it may be that even that, some people would argue, is going to be taken over by AI.
So I think you're thinking in terms of, just sitting at a computer. But what if we go on a bike ride? What if we plant a garden? What if we go on more hikes? What if we actually get out away from the virtual world and into more of the physical world as well? And I think that's just going to make us better humans
Yeah.
overall, better community members, better family members, because we'll have a lot more contentness within inside of us. It's a little frightening because, we both know that emotional and AI is coming down the pipe too, because
Yes.
it's just going to be based on machine learning and eventually be able to recognize patterns and think for itself. And so, we need to learn how to play again, but more in a kid-like way, get back more to childhood and those things that we enjoyed so much.
That's really great. Last question then, it really goes to, and anything else you want to share as we wrap up, which is really what kind of world do we want? Which you started to lead into many different times, including just now, which is, well, okay, but how does this all work in terms of just the basic economics of this? Is it the basic income grant that, many have promoted? How do people actually have the resources to live that playful life in nature and so forth and so on that we can listen and, oh, wow, that would be amazing. But how do we actually make that work economically?
So let's just say you were a software engineer who loves to bake a certain type of your grandmother's cookie, and you're making a lot of those cookies. The AI is going to be able to sell it. It's almost like we have to think in terms of a lot of passive income that's going
Yes.
to come our way as well. And so, you know, nobody has all the answers at this time, what the world has looked like. I mean, in fact, I think we're more on that boat of ignoring that it's coming than we
Yes.
are in terms of adopting it. And so hopefully we're going to take these little baby steps, recognizing it's going to impact every industry, except maybe that individual who has to sit there with their finger near the nuclear power plant, being able to turn it on and turn it off. I like to challenge people to say, let's think ahead a little bit. It's 2025. What is life going to look like for you in 2030? So that's just less than 5 years away.
Yes.
And if individuals want to take out their phone or a piece of paper and write down after we're finished what your job title is, where your primary work location is, and what your typical workforce hours are going to be. Where it gets really, really interesting, if you were to look at this in less than 5 years out, is that I predict at least for 70% of the people that do this, at least two of those things will be completely different when you open up this time capsule in 2013. So, this workforce shift, it's not coming, it's already here. And the question is, are you ready for it?
Well, thank you so very much. We're sorry about the slides, but it was a tour de force as expected, no matter slides or no slides. I want to encourage everybody around the world, if you haven't read Deborah's book on Silicon Valley, it still is a classic, a timeless classic. But the new book, Employment is Dead, The Future of Work and I encourage you. I've had the great privilege of listening to different pieces of it, reading different pieces of it. It is fantastic and really provides guidance not just for work, but really everyday life in a Web 3.0 world. So thank you, Deb. Any final comments or thoughts or reflections before we let you go?
No, just hopefully a hope of inspiration that we're gonna have just a much better opportunity to shape the future we all want to live.
Thank you so much. You're the best. Thank you for leading us.
Thank
And
you.
all the best, everyone. Please stay safe and healthy around the world. Thank you for joining us throughout the week for Davos Worldwide, our incredible team. The future is bright despite the risks and challenges. We can do it together. All the very best to one and all. Thanks again, Deborah.
Thank you.